This is the scent of the female, so it's the males that are coming in.
There weren't very many people interested in dragonflies and damselflies in Ireland. There'd been 3 or 4 people, and I have the books that they wrote, and there was a lady called Cynthia Longfield who was down in Cork, and there was a gentleman who worked for the Ordnance Survey in Dublin who was interested in dragonflies and damselflies, and they had done a certain amount of work in this country. So I spent the first year in Sligo and into the second year just looking at dragonflies and damselflies. And nobody who was a naturalist had really been to them before because there were no records, nothing was published. The place where I found the damselfly was actually somewhere I'd never been to before. It was up on the side of a mountain, looking north, over Lough Gill. The Isle of Innisfree was just about 2 or 3 kilometres away. And we went out with our butterfly nets and were catching different ones. And suddenly, without any expectation at all, something that was caught in the net, I took a look at it and said, "This is not in the book." I couldn't believe it. I'd looked at these creatures for quite a few years, and I knew instantly that this was something new that wasn't in the main book for identification. And not only was it different for Ireland, I knew it wasn't in Great Britain either. So it was new to the whole of this geographical region. I didn't know what it was. It could have been new to science, which would have been really exciting. And on getting home, I got a book out that was covering all of the dragonflies and damselflies of Europe. And I went through it, and there it was, something that fitted perfectly. And it was known from France and the Netherlands and 1 or 2 other places. But it did exist. So it had been described by scientists, and it had this fancy scientific name of Coenagrion lunulatum. And the second name, lunulatum, referred to a pattern on the body that vaguely represented the moon. So luna is a word in Latin that means the moon.
The first time I saw Irish damselflies was in County Leitrim, and it was a lake. It wasn't actually a bog, and it was over near Coenagrion. And these low nutrient lakes that you have in County Leitrim are very rich with things like Irish damselflies. And what has been happening to Cavan lakes, maybe, as long ago as the 1950s. In fact, they did work in Balnamore. They recorded the information from the mud from Garadice, and you could date events like when there was cattle sales, when there was changes in sewage works, when there was increase in population, and it was all recorded in the mud layers. So we do know from a long time what we've been doing to our lakes and rivers and how we've changed the water chemistry over time, and that can be seen, as the EPA knows, in all the work that they do on what they call the bioindicators, the invertebrates that are telling us what has been happening for quite a long period. You see, if you take a chemical sample, that's for on that day. That's on Wednesday, the chemicals in the water on Wednesday. Now, of course, by the time you come to Friday, those chemicals are going downstream. But the insects sitting there are telling you what it's been like for the past 6 months, for the past 3 years. So they're a much better indicator of the long term, what's going on over time. Similarly, with our lakes, although they don't use the same system, but they are telling you this is things are changing, things are happening by human activity, both by our land use and by what we actually do ourselves, by our own waste, the good old septic tanks. So these things are in front of us. Every lake and every river we look at in County Cavan are telling us what's going on.
So it seemed to like small lakes with a lot of vegetation around them, but the vegetation being aquatic vegetation that's associated with small lakes. So things like reed mace or the rushes and so on. So it does seem to have a few things that help you along at finding new sites for it. I wouldn't go to a lake that was just a stony lakeshore because it won't be there. So we knew perhaps the most important thing was the season, the fact it came out in June, because that's very early for most dragonflies and damselflies. The peak time is really July and August.
No, so the Irish damselfly is supposed to have more black markings on the abdomens, which is, you know, the tail, the long bit. And obviously I wouldn't rely on that because there's females that can be sort of more blue, and then there's teneral stages which haven't got the full marking. So I really would be looking for the crescent shape marking on the, so what do they call it, segment 2, but to me it's just, you know, just below the thorax, the top of the tail, so to speak. So I would really rely on looking for the crescent shape marking. But when you're working with a creature that's not very common, it takes time to know it.
Okay, look.
Very cool fish. You're a big padded jacket.
I need the pockets. I'm naked under this.
Oh, right. That's all right.
Well, we all are, really.
Too much information, Isabel.
Emer, how are you?
Hi, Isabel, it's good.
And makeup artist.
Will you focus?
Get better right here now. There's no eye spots in the back wing.
One eye spot. Yeah.
Do spiders eat damselflies?
It'd have to be a pretty big spider.
Yeah, but do they eat them? No, he's got too much blue in between his spots.
Now there's the Irish damselfly.
No, I would lay money you'd have to do a Tarzan jump to get out of that. You're some friend. Get me out of this. I'm out. I love bogs because they're interesting. They're full of surprises. They're just a selfish pleasure in enjoying them and just enjoying very beautiful things and unusual things, and the whole setup's different. The birds are going to be slightly different. They're going to find things like lizards that don't do well in a silage field or a grazing field. You're going to find things like green hair streak that don't do well in perennial ryegrass. They need there's a set of plants, a set of insects, a set of birds. So it's a different ecology. Yeah, the different stages are called instars. So as it grows, it has to shed its exoskeleton, because unlike us, it doesn't grow from the inside out, so to speak. They've got a hard exoskeleton, so it has to shed that and move up to a different stage. So again, when you're trying to identify the nymphs, it's the later stages, instars, practically before they emerge, that you're looking for, so you can be confident that you've got it right. Just for me, going in there, that you're looking at a complete new. I suppose it's novelty in a way. It's a new set of insects. There's going to be something you're finding is different. It's not what you're going to find every day, and as well as that, we're in Cavan, all our little small raised bogs. We've dug them up, we've drained them, so you don't get an opportunity every day to go into a raised bog, unless you're living beside one, which I don't live beside.